Tabletop role-playing games allow us to step into a realm that's not our own. They can be exciting and thrilling, letting us push our boundaries and explore things we'd never get to experience in real life. But sometimes, the thrill can turn to a bit of a chill, as events of the story end up making other players uncomfortable, which can ruin everyone's enjoyment. So today, we're going to talk about how to make your players feel safe during gameplay, and why sometimes being a little uncomfortable can actually be a good thing. In previous Tabletop episodes, we've talked a lot about Eddie's work on Pugmire, a lighthearted fantasy game about pets in the distant future. But prior to becoming the Prince of Puppies, Eddie spent years as the creative lead for a very different kind of game, Vampire the Masquerade. Really, Eddie? Wow, man. Teenage Gothmat is bowing down right now. Seriously, props. Sorry, back to it. So we've brought him back in, because he has a lot of experience working on horror games which deal with dark and controversial topics. He's run games that have made players squirm in their seats, and sometimes that's a good thing. So let's start things off with an analogy. Roller coasters. Most people think of roller coasters as fun, but if you described the experience to, say your friendly neighborhood space alien, riding a roller coaster is about hurtling down a very high railroad track at top speed in an open train as you're thrown in a variety of directions. Which, if you think about it, doesn't sound like fun so much as sheer terror. And during the ride, there's a part of you that intellectually understands you'll be fine, but there's another part of you that's a little worried you might die. Playing a game that pushes your personal boundaries can feel the same. Well, maybe not the part about possibly dying, but it can be scary to dredge up the darker parts of your psyche and bring them out for everyone to see. And sometimes it can be cathartic to play through that kind of scenario, or even just be a little evil in a game. Because that purging of fear, terror, or self-loathing that comes from being in a simulated environment that feels dangerous or stressful is really quite safe. And that's the key factor: safety. Roller coasters have thick belts and heavy metal bars that remind us at all times that we're securely strapped in for the ride. Tabletop RPGs need to have the emotional equivalent of safety belts during gameplay, so that players can get the most out of their catharsis without the experience inadvertently plunging over the edge and harming others. And that emotional safety belt is trust. If the players can trust the game master, as well as each other, then it's easy for everyone to stretch their personal boundaries and explore things that might be personally valuable for them to explore. And there are several great tools and tips on how you can build that trust at the table. But before we dive into those, I just want to mention real quick that while tabletop role-playing games can absolutely have a therapeutic value, they should never take the place of therapy. Even though some therapists are using these kind of games in their own practices. There's actually a great nonprofit organization called the Bodina Group that explores therapeutic applications of RPGs. And they released a booklet called Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness, which gets into all of this more. We put a link to it in the description below because it's fascinating, and maybe we'll talk about it some more some other time. Anyway, the first and most obvious tool you can use is communication. Talking about what your game will entail, along with discussing everyone's personal boundaries beforehand, is a fantastic way to start building trust. Because sure, it might feel pretty cool to play a jerk for a while, but if you don't talk to your other players or have them on board with your character's potential actions, you can't just abdicate responsibility and say that, well, that's just what my character would do. Think of them as emotional warning beacons, letting the players know in advance what kind of content they can expect, and also what content they won't see no matter what. It's great to set these boundaries up at the beginning of a game before you start. Not only because it hopefully avoids anything that will be a bad experience for the people playing, but it also lets everyone talk in an environment where no one gets defensive because they're getting accused of crossing a line. But not everyone is comfortable with talking about their concerns up front. And of course, something might come up during gameplay that wasn't discussed beforehand. A great way to handle these situations is a tool called the X card. Created by John Stavropoulos, the X card is a piece of paper with an X on it that's placed in the middle of the table. Whenever anybody at the table feels uncomfortable with the topic at hand, all they have to do is touch or point to the X card, and that lets everyone know it's time to change the subject. They don't have to explain or justify their concerns. The game master simply moves immediately onto the next scene, or rewinds events and goes in a different direction. The X card gives everyone a chance to speak up if the game is pushing their personal boundaries too far. This established rule up front has to be respected though, which gets us back to trust. Too many times, I've been in a game where players complain that the group's not letting them role play because the group wants their boundaries respected. So in that situation, I'll let you in on a little secret. Don't be that player. If you're ever putting your own desires over something that's causing someone else legitimate harm, you're not just playing a jerk, you are a jerk. The other players have to trust that you'll respect their wishes, so they can know what you're doing in character isn't a reflection of you as a person. So when people say they have a boundary, accept it. No amount of staying in character is ever worth it in a game when it's harming someone in the real world. Finally, reframing a concept in a more positive light can keep the topic on the table without making it offensive. As someone with hearing loss, Eddie is passionate about disability representation, and he sees post-apocalyptic and cyberpunk games as a great way to showcase that. I mean, think about it. How many people in zombie movies are missing a hand or an eye? And really, cyberware is just another form of assistive device. But in both cases, characters in zombie movies or cyberpunk novels are still strong, capable people that incorporate their disability into their personal stories. By shifting the narrative focus so that disabled characters are equally represented as cool and capable, everyone at the table can explore the topic in a more inclusive fashion. And that kind of representation is really important, and once again goes back to trust. Because a person seeing themselves in the game you're playing says that everyone is welcome at the table, and that their experiences are valid. By putting those disabled characters up as iconic and aspirational people, the group is letting everyone know that disabled people are also aspirational. That what brings them to the table, both figuratively and literally, is interesting and compelling. And disabled players can, in turn, trust that the group values them and their contributions. Having mutual trust at the table means we can use tabletop RPGs to explore ideas that are uncomfortable, from the Holocaust to racism to violence, in a way that's healthy for everyone. And when the game is run safely, we can use these experiences to help us understand how we would confront these things in the real world. And they can give us experiences to share with others once we leave the table. Because at the end of the day, those positive experiences are really what role-playing's all about.